Ayodhya debates. Anciently, did Rama live in Ayodhya or did he live at all? Medieval, is it true that Hindus built a temple there and that the temple was destroyed? And thirdly, contemporary, what should be done with the site? I guess by now we are facing an accomplished fact. When this was originally written, it's a much developed version of a paper I gave in St. Petersburg, Russia in 2011, just after the verdict by the Uttar Pradesh High Court, which went in favor of the Hindu claim, and which is really the decisive judgment. The Supreme Court judgment after that only confirms it and makes it a bit more practical by moving the site allotted for a mosque out of the way, because otherwise it would still constantly be a source. So was this Rama's birthplace? Well, strictly speaking, we don't know, because it is impossible to prove a birthplace at that time distance. And so, even if you would have some plaque saying, here this morning Rama was born, that would not be proof. And strictly speaking, there is no proof. However, there is a literary tradition that is not at all contradicted. And it has logic on its side. I mean, it's a hillside overlooking the place. And so it's a place of honor, a natural place of honor, logical place for a royal palace. There are many places of pilgrimage of many religions that have no proof either. Like, can you prove that Mecca, which was supposedly built or rebuilt by Abraham, because Adam had originally built it, and it disappeared in the flood. Okay, so that's the official reason why Mecca is sacred. Now, can you prove that? Has that been proven? Has anybody ever demanded that this be proven? No, of course not. So the normal secular policy is to respect the beliefs of people. You see, the gods we don't know about, but these people are fellow human beings. They have as many rights as anyone. Okay, was there a temple at the site? Well, since very early, there is archaeology at the site. And so in this case, the text and the archaeology converge very nicely, as shown in great detail in a book that I advise you all, in the Geography of the Ramayana, published last year only by Nadumuri Ravi. So that explains all the historical aspects of that Valmiki Ramayana. So he shows that, according to textual evidence, linking it with the king lists in the Puranas and the Mahabharata and so on, Rama should be born before 1600 BC up to 1900 BC, not earlier. And this coincides with the archaeological finding that the human habitation at the site goes back to about that same period. And that's logical because it was a new city. According to the Valmiki Ramayana itself, it was built by Aja, the grandfather of Rama. And so all the earlier ancestors, going back to Ikshvaku and Maņi, they lived in another city also called Ayodhya. So something must have happened with that city. It was flooded or an earthquake or something, so that the city was moved but retained the same name. So now it is the great challenge for archaeologists to go find that older city. Now that the Ayodhya affair is over, let's move on. Medieval, okay, why did the temple disappear? So we have a number of layers of not necessarily habitation, but human use of the site. And so the last we have is definitely a temple, which was destroyed in 1030, or at least archaeologically you can say it was destroyed in the early 11th century. But what we do know is that in 1030, for 3 years, the city was occupied by Salar Massoud Ghaznavi, the nephew of Mahmud Ghaznavi, and also a great temple destroyed. And 3 years later, he was defeated in the Battle of Bahrain. And then the temple was rebuilt, but far more magnificently, like Joe Biden says, build back better. So that's what they did. And that's when the great magnificent temple was built, of which we have found the pillar bases. You know, that's what archaeologists now, have found in 2003. And then that temple was again demolished. When was it demolished? So everybody says it was demolished, also the local Muslims. There are many old Muslim sources that say the same thing. There's none that says something else. So it is usually blamed on Babur. No, actually that's not sure. The one thing that the courts have accepted as archaeologically verified is in fact, formulated with a presupposition in mind that there was a temple till then. Actually, there wasn't. During the time of the debate of 1991, archaeologists for both sides said, yeah, but this building is clearly older than the Mughal period. This is a Sultanate building. And why not? It is in fact totally logical. It was already said by Syed Shahabuddin at the time of the debate. The Supreme Court, in its verdict, says that this archaeological evidence is unassailable. Yes, clearly there was a temple there, but we would have liked to hear why the temple was destroyed. Now that evidence is also there, that's why you have the second part of Sitaram Goel's book, Hindu Temples, What Happened to Them, where you have plenty of testimonies from Muslims and the justification. They say, but this is what Islam asked from us, this is what the Prophet also did. That's the ultimate justification. Anyway, so as Shahabuddin observed, it is hardly conceivable, if it is true that Muslims destroyed temples, it is hardly conceivable that the most iconoclastic regime in history, the Sultanate period, would have allowed such a temple at such an important Hindu site to subsist like in front of them, because Ayodhya was a provincial capital. There was an army there and so on, if they wanted to destroy it, it was done in a minute. And they didn't, according to the people who say that Babur destroyed the temple. And so I agree with Syed Shahabuddin. Definitely the temple was destroyed in 1194. And by Shah Suran Ghori, another nephew of a great conqueror of Muhammad Ghori. And then, sometime later, a mosque was built, and that's the Babri Masjid. Now, why is it called Babri Masjid? Yeah, clearly Babur had something to do with it. But what? So over the gate that used to stand there, that I've still seen with my own eyes when it was still there, it was built by Mir Baki on orders of Babur. But is this true? You see, there's a problem with all the written evidence that we have. People in those days may have had their reasons to say something else. And clearly Babur had destroyed some Hindu presence there. And it's logical that there was a Hindu presence because Hindus always kept coming back to the site as close as possible. Like for instance, and I've seen it with my own eyes last year, a number of houses close to the temple have a little temple inside of them. And so people kept worshipping there as close as possible to the site, because the site was important, the temple not so much, the site it was important. And so Hindus kept getting as much as they could whenever they could. So the last years before Babur, there was a sort of civil war or war of succession within the Sultanate, within the Lodi dynasty. So this gave Hindus enough breathing space to, because the site was not important to Muslims. When they had war and so on, this is the last thing they were going to care about. So there was a Hindu presence there, exactly like we've seen with our own eyes between 1949 and 1992. Namely, a mosque building used by Hindus as a temple. And it is that Hindu presence that Babur destroyed and made it a real mosque again. But not for long, because there's a second part that people often somehow never realize. You get Akbar, the grandson of Babur, who at some point later in his life became very liberal and gave Hindus the right to rebuild their destroyed temples, like the Krishna Janmabhoomi, like the Somnath temple, like the Casuistry. Then why not the Ram Janmabhoomi? Now, clearly the mosque remained standing because it was standing there till 1992. Yet, there was very much a Hindu presence there. Indeed, it was totally used as a Hindu temple and not at all as a mosque, going by the testimonies by foreign travelers. And so they always describe Hindus there. And they describe how Ram Navami was celebrated and so on. They don't mention Muslims at all. And there were no communal riots or anything. No, it's just the Hindu side. And the son of Guru Nanak went on pilgrimage there. And Tulsidas used to go there. He used to sleep in the mosque. He himself described it, I sleep in the mosque. But when he's describing how he led a simple life and so on, no high and cozy beds for Tulsidas. I sleep in the mosque. Which travelers could do. Muslim travelers could sleep in mosques, and I don't know the detail about it, but I'm sure Hindu travelers could sleep in Hindu temples, at least in some parts of it. Yes, hello. And so, it was used by Hindus. Then came Aurangzeb. This is another thing we don't know. We know that Aurangzeb destroyed the Kashi Vishwanath and all the rest. Again, we don't know what he did with Ram Janmabhoomi. But very probably he again terminated the Hindu presence there. But we don't know, because sometime later, after Aurangzeb, it's again used by Hindus. And then, strangely, because this is when the Peshwas conquer most of the Mughal Empire, and so sometimes they leave everything as it is, sometimes here and there they interfere to re-Hinduize places. Now, then it comes under Mughal control again. It has to do with the equation of forces with the British and all. And then you get a local, the Nawab dynasty that asserts its independence vis-a-vis the Mughals. And so for a while it is again, more Islamic. And it is then that it is beginning to be reused again as a mosque. An interesting proof of it, you see now with the Prana Pratishta, some Rajput community here has restarted wearing turbans. And they are the 9th generation that didn't wear turbans. So if you calculate back 25 years per generation, you are at about 1800, which is about when it really started being used again as a mosque. And then you get a well-known story that there were riots in 1853 or 1857 and so on. Then there was a trial where all the parties, including the Muslims, admitted that yes, of course, the mosque was built on a destroyed temple, But the British judge said, well, so long ago, let it remain like that. Okay. Well, and then we come to the modern period. That's the next chapter. A few more things about the evidence. So, in the time of the debate, the fact of Muslim iconoclasm was often denied or minimized. So that line of argument has been totally defeated, fair and square. But not that the other side is giving up, so they've moved to the next line of defense. And now they're admitting that to a very small extent, there really was Islamic iconoclasm. But they say, that's not because Islam wanted that, it's the Hindus who taught them to do that. And so what they use is another phenomenon, which is attested in Mesopotamia already 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, which is the abduction of idols. And so you see there's some war and about anything, mostly not about religion, but you see as a sign of their victory, they capture the central idol of the central temple of the losing party and they take it with them. And then what happens? Well, there are a few such cases in India also, very few, but yes, there are. And so what happens in those cases? The Shiva temple in this place is taken away to the Shiva temple in that place. And then nothing. So the losing party may sculpt some new idol and go through the prana pratishtha that we know also so well. And in the other place, in the winner's place, the new idol is installed and some local priest does the prana pratishtha and the religion simply continues. In that Shiva temple, Shiva is worshipped. In this Shiva temple, Shiva is worshipped. And nothing changes, only a material object has changed places. Now that is not at all what the Muslim conquerors did. They destroyed the idol as well as the house in which it was located. And they meant not to do anything with a piece of artwork, which they destroyed. They meant to destroy a religion. It's not that they took the Shiva Lingam from the Somnath temple and installed it in the central mosque in Ghazni, to worship it. That would have been the same thing. So, this is pretty nonsensical. There is also another nonsensical element, the idea that Muslim kings imitated Hindu kings. There is absolutely not one case where a Muslim ruler said, I did this, or any other practice, by the way. I did this because I heard that some Hindu king did this. I thought, the Hindus know how to do it. Let's do it. No, you see, whenever they feel like justifying it, they say, but you see, Mahmud Ghaznavi also did this. And you know what? Muhammad did so in Mecca when he conquered Mecca. That's what he did with the Kaaba. He destroyed all the idols. So, anyway, they go on trying. So 3 demolitions, yes. No. We don't know the exact number. It's at least 2, which is in 1030 and in 1194. So, about Babur, I don't think there was a destruction of an actual building, though there was a destruction of use of a temple. This is more or less what we went through. Yes. Oh yeah, one point, about the Hindu discussion about this is a lot of personal animus against Babur, just like against Aurangzeb. Now, this is totally misplaced. I don't know too much about the personality of Babur, but the case of Aurangzeb I studied more closely, and so he was not an evil man. I mean, of course, he killed his brothers in order to become the emperor. A few more not so nice details, but nevertheless, he was a very pious man. Just like Modi, fasting for 11 days. So for instance, he very much blamed his father for being such a, being a bit too liberal with money, investing in what for Muslims was a total waste of money. Places like the Taj Mahal. Art lovers may like it, but from the Muslim side it was not so useful. And so he dethroned him, became the emperor himself. And he started a totally new type of regime. He was a very ascetic person. He did not want to live off the state exchequer. And this was not some pious wish, he did it. And so he used to make these hats, and because they were made by the emperor, they fetched a very good price in the market. And he calligraphed the Quran. So, and that's what he lived on. So, yes, I mean, a very nice man. But that piety has exactly the same root as his well-documented iconoclasm. Namely, he got religion. He started taking Islam serious. In the beginning, it was not like that. He was the son of his father and he didn't care much. But later in life, he got religion. And so he started becoming ascetic and he started becoming an iconoclast. Those two have the same root and they have nothing to do with his personality, only with his religion. That's how you should understand the whole phenomenon. There was a consensus about this, so the whole debate in 1991 was, strictly speaking, totally superfluous, because in fact everybody knew what the problem was. Like Rajiv Gandhi, for instance, had the position that whether to build a new temple on the site should depend on whether there was a temple in the past. Now that's simply a diplomatic way of saying, I want the temple built. Because everybody knew that there was a temple in the past. The controversy created by the so-called eminent historians who denied that there was a temple was totally artificial and based on absolutely nothing, which the eminent historians ultimately in 2005 were forced to admit on the witness stand before the Uttar Pradesh High Court. Okay. So, yes, political. Yeah, you see, many people now say, yes, it's thanks to the BJP and so on. That is a bit of a flattered version. Congress has played a big role in this. The movement for the liberation of Ram Janmabhoomi was founded by one Hindu Mahasabha member of parliament, namely Mahanta Vaidyanatha, the personal guru of Yogi Adityanath, and then two congressmen, a local politician, Dawda Al-Khanna, and the ex-interim prime minister, Gulzari Lal Nanda. Now that's like a heavyweight within Congress. Then the prime minister, Rajiv Gandhi, was slated for laying the first stone in 1989. Ultimately, he sent the home minister, but at least the Congress government was a party to the building of the Rama temple. And that's not the end of it. The Congress was forced into the opposition by the 1989 elections. The VP Singh government, after a while, came in conflict with the BJP that supported them from the opposition. The government fell. Chandrasekhar formed a very minoritarian government, supported from the opposition by Congress. And then Rajiv Gandhi forced him to call a scholars' debate about the evidence, knowing very well what the inevitable result would be. So, that's his contribution. That's why I think that Sonia Gandhi ought to have accepted the invitation. She should have been there to represent her husband and all his merits for the new temple. Because this evidence is what ultimately convinced the court to award the site to the Hindus. Then you know what happened, the demolition and so on. And so then it went back to the court, to the lower court, when the Supreme Court refused to take it. And then they got serious about the evidence. Then in 2003 they organized this archaeological evidence with B.R. Maņi was the leader, and the most prominent person today is K.K. Mohammed. He was also invited, he couldn't come for health reasons. So they found the temple and everything with it. There are 4 moments of archaeological findings. One is in the 70s by B.B. Lal, who found the pillar bases and who was ordered by Indira Gandhi never to say a word about it to anyone. Then in 1992, in the demolition, a lot of temple pieces came to light. They were worked into the mosque. Like between the inner wall and the outer wall, you had this stone inscription, which says in so many words, this is a temple of, the incarnation of Vishnu that killed the 10-headed one, meaning Ravana. So it says in so many words, this is the Rama temple, of which the eminent historian Irfan Habib then tried to counter that it was stolen and put there by the Casuistry. You should show that how you do that. So in the middle of this crowd and all this event, Moreover, the museum from where he said that it came, denied it also. Then in 2003, you have the official excavations where all the pillar bases were found and also a lot of temple remains. And then finally, not to forget, in 2020, you had a case of serendipity, which means to serendipity. Comes, by the way, from the word Sri Lanka. And so it means to find something that you weren't looking for. So in this case, they were going to start a new temple. Now, when a building company starts building something, first they have to make a big hole, okay? And then all the archaeologists come flocking. Like, for instance, they have done big works around the Kaaba in Mecca, which is very full of skyscrapers and so on nowadays. Now there, just like everyone in Varanasi and so on, in every old and important city, if something is built, the archaeologists come flocking, because of course this digging a hole is not according to the rules of archaeology, stratification and so on, but nevertheless, whatever they find, is there. And so in Mecca, nothing was there. Because Mecca, there was no city in Mecca. Mecca was created 50 years after the first caliphate started. And there was some revolution in the caliphate, and one party spirited away the black stone. And so they moved as far away from Damascus, which was the capital, and moved into Arabia, and there the fighting continued, but there they put the black stone and there it remained. But that's a different story. But by the way, this was always an argument, you see, but the real question, that's what Romila Tapa said, the real question is, did Rama live there? Now that's not the real question. Did Adam build the Kaaba? Is that the real question? Do Muslims who go on pilgrimage to Mecca, do they have to first prove, oh, I go there because here, Adam built it? Come on. Anyways, so you see, in 2020 in Ayodhya, they found again all kinds of temple pieces, sculptures, and all the rest. About the temple having been there, there's absolutely no doubt anymore. And so the few surviving eminent historians look the other way. They never give any comment on this whole thing. However, I noticed that now people who weren't there, you see, the next generation of journalists still try to somehow suggest that we're not really sure about what's really in there. It may be concocted. They can't say out, blank, that it was a lie, there was no temple there. That they don't dare to do anymore. But still, they try to portray it as illegitimate. And now that at this point, I might also say that the last few days, the New York Times and the BBC and so on, that have reported on this, have, of course, the usual, reported on the 2,000 people killed in Gujarat by the ugly, vicious Narendra Modi, and not mentioned why it happened because of the killing of the 59 Hindus who were caste sevaks, at any rate, who were coming from Ayodhya. So they should also be listed among the victims of the whole case. But so similarly with the material circumstance at the site, they say, oh, it was a temple built on an ancient Muslim mosque, and there they stop. First of all, the expression ancient mosque, you would think that, oh, this is something like the Acropolis or Ajanta and the Dora, ancient, I mean, you see, even for mosque lovers, this was a very pedestrian, cheap mosque. It was an ugly structure. Then, of course, it had an earlier history of temples destroyed at the site. To explain this, to explain the fact now that everybody says Rama has returned, means that Rama was there before. That's an essential element of the present happenings. So any responsible journalist should mention that. No. You see, nothing at all about the prehistory of the site. Well, yeah. The wrong BJP discourse. So some people say, yeah, the BJP was lying by saying that there was a temple there and so on. That has all been, refuted by now. However, their discourse is still flawed. First of all, they focused on Hindu sentiments. If you go through old footage of L.K. Advani at the time and so on, this is a recurring refrain that, sentiments, respect Hindu sentiments. Now you see, sentiments is what you invoke when you have no right to something. Your 10-year-old boy, picks the roses in the front garden of your next door neighbor to give them to his mother or something, but meanwhile he has, of course, picked those flowers. And that's not what you normally do. And so, father said, come on, go go apologize to the neighbor. And the lady next door says, yeah, well, he's so attached to it, respect his sentiments. So he's in the wrong. He had no right to those flowers, but sentiments. You see, that's when you evoke sentiments. I mean, now for the Muslims with their Babri Masjid, you could invoke sentiments. You could say that the Supreme Court awarding a plot of land, miles away to build a mosque, that's to assuage their sentiments. But you see, the Hindu right to the site had nothing to do with sentiments. It was their site. They had a right to this. And what the Supreme Court did was nothing more than restore a right that has been with the Hindus for thousands of years. Then, as Sitaram Goel said, this temple is a toy. Now, sorry for being so disrespectful, but in the larger picture, it is a toy. I mean, religiously, it's much more than a toy, but politically, it is a toy, to win the Hindu vote. And I hope that is also this year how it is going to work out. Nevertheless, in reality, this is just one case of a much larger problem. This one temple is just one of tens of thousands. And so the occasions should have been used to educate the public about Islamic iconoclasm. And then finally, another escape route to minimize the Hindu-Muslim conflict inherent in it is to portray it as national versus foreign. The national hero Rama versus the foreign invader Babur. And that's just beside the point. You see, the Greeks came as foreign invaders. They conquered the little corner of India, and they didn't destroy anything. On the contrary, this Heliodorus made this pillar for Krishna, and Menander, he wrote, or about him was written the Milinda Panya, Buddhist text, because he had become a Buddhist and so on. They contributed to native Indian culture. The British came. Now, about them, I don't say that they didn't destroy anything. They didn't destroy Indian, they destroyed Indian industry, and they destroyed the education system. That's pretty serious. And so, as a consequence, as collateral damage, millions of people died in famines. And yet, they didn't destroy temples. On the contrary, they too contributed greatly to Hindu culture. They deciphered the Brahmi script so that we could read the Ashoka edicts and everything else. They discovered the Arthashastra, which had been lying there for centuries, and so on. They contributed, they didn't destroy temples. So Babur did not do this because he was a foreigner. There have been native Indians who were converts to Islam, who also destroyed temples. And by contrast, there have been foreigners who didn't destroy temples. He did this because of his religion. And that makes it more difficult to deal with this issue, because it entails conflict between groups of citizens of India today. And so it needs sensitivity and wisdom and so on to handle that. But nevertheless, I don't think in the long run it is profitable to hide behind lies. Yes. So the judicial decision was totally logical. They had the evidence and they decided on that yes, it belongs to the bus. So in my opinion, with the local, Belgian proverb, la vérité est bonne, truth is beneficial. And so it is, you won't have much pleasure from hiding behind rosy distortions of the reality. Okay, the solution. So now it's not a problem anymore. So now we can look back, on what ought to have been a solution from the beginning. Namely, you could focus on the history. This is what we have done, or what we have been forced to do by the eminent historians, who actually, nobody made a point of the history. It was very well known. And so anyway, so this has forced us to really look closely and find documents that otherwise we wouldn't have known, and so on. So for us historians, it's been a good exercise. We had some fun. It's not very often that issues of history become politically important, make front page news. So yeah, I like it. But nevertheless, it wasn't important. You see, all this history is nice to know, but that's not what you should decide today. You see, the situation today is that Hindus come on pilgrimage to Ayodhya. Muslims don't. They go to Mecca, or if they don't have money, they go at least to Ajmer. They never ever go to Ayodhya. So therefore, it follows that any normal secularist government will say, okay, that's for the Hindus. And so finally, after a lot of struggle, after the Kothari brothers and the train passengers in Godhra and so on have given their life for it, finally we start doing what is normal. What happened on the 22nd in Ayodhya was just a normalization. It's just like the abolition of Article 370. You see, there is no country in the world where one province of a country is off limits to the people from the other provinces. So abolishing that is simply renormalizing. That's also why no country cared to protest. Normally they love putting India in the dock, but here everybody understood, this is normal. It's only some secularist journalists in India that try to make a fuss about it. Yeah. So you see, the other side could have said, let bygones be bygones. Whenever Hindus talk about some painful episode in the past, say, oh, no, don't talk about it, let bygones be bygones. Well, here you could have let bygones be bygones. Okay, the Babri Masjid is bygone, and so let's not talk about it anymore. I was there in Ayodhya during the Rāma Lalā, and so, and as a long-standing critic of Narendra Modi, I have to say his speech was just great, very good. I mean, his rhetoric was very good, but I mean also, if in a quiet moment you look at the text of what he said, it was very well considered. Anyway, so nothing was said about Islam by none of the speakers. There were a few Muslims present, very recognizable, with Dadi, Wala, but I mean, they didn't seem to have any problem with it. I've also seen footage on TV afterwards about Muslim households that celebrated Rama and so on. And, I don't know how they doctrinally get away with it, but I'm glad that they do it. And so, all the fuss in the New York Times and so on about, the Muslims are being oppressed and so on. I don't know. I mean, nothing in the ceremony had that effect. And to my knowledge, no Muslim has felt like that, or has at least expressed any feeling like that. The whole country remained peaceful. It's just like after the verdict in 2010. The one in 2019 was expected because it only confirmed the earlier one. But then in 2010, everybody was on tenterhooks. And so the secularists were constantly warning, this is going to make the Muslims riot and blah, blah, blah. Now nothing happened. And that's logical because for the Muslims this is not an issue. The day you start, tampering with their Sharia law, common civil code, now that's going to create trouble. That they really care about. But this wasn't just a fake issue for them. So it's good that it's now just a temple. That's what it should be. Okay, enough for this. Now I have a second PowerPoint for the remaining, 12 minutes? But this is not so important. It's about us, about the voice of India. Yes. The Voice of India is a publishing house